Brother Abu Dhar, inshallah, we start in 2 minutes, right?
Inshallah, I'm still waiting for Hussein to join the meeting.
Okay.
I'm gonna give him a call.
Yeah, just call him, please. Thank you. Brother Abu Zar, if is a delay for Hussein, Brother Hussein, you can start and then he will join after.
Okay, in that case, let's go ahead and get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters who are watching from the GTA, who are watching from North America, who are watching from places like Pakistan, India, I'd like to welcome you to the program. The topic of today's program is the Arb'aeen Conference, the Justice for Hosseini Children. I'd like to start this program by the recitation of the Holy Quran. And throughout this program, we do have a lot of events planned for you. We have videos, we have our esteemed scholars. We have Sheikh Sabaiti, Sheikh Shafiq Huda, Sister Layla, and inshallah, it will be an eventful night. So let's go ahead and get started with the recitation of the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس والزهاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها وكذبت ثمود بتقواها إذ انبعث أشقاها وقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله فسقياها فعقروها فكذبوه فعقرها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. To start off our program tonight, I'd like to start with a video by Arb'aeen. So for those who are watching, please tune in and we'll get the video started right away.
ما با اهل بیت امتحان میشیم در موقعیت‌های مختلف. ما با اهل بیت امتحان
باب
میشیم.
المبتلا به الناس.
احتمال داره اربعین یک امتحان بی سر و صدا اما بسیار مهم باشه از ما کسانی که در این عصر زندگی میکنیم برای یاری حضرت ولی عصر ارواحنا له الفدا. شرکت در اربعین و حضور در اربعین واجب نیست، کمک کردن به اربعین واجب نیست، اما چه بسا کوتاهی های ما رو فردا به رخ ما بکشن بگن مگه تو ندیدی موقع نصرت دین خدا بود با اربعین و جهانی تر می توانستی بکنی اربعین رو، چرا در خانه نشستی؟ چرا مرخصی نگرفتی؟ اگر شما اون زمانی که از ما سوال میکنن برگردید جواب بدید خب بر من واجب که نبود، به تو خواهند گفت شب عاشورا امام حسین به همه یارانش فرمود واجب نیست اینجا بمونید، بلند شید برید. چرا کسی نرفت؟ چرا اصرار کردن که ما میخوایم پیشمرگ تو بشیم؟ کسانی که در اربعین هر قدمی برمیدارن اصرار دارن که برای حجت ابن الحسن العسکری ارواحنا له الفدا، برای ظهور او، برای رفع غربت حسین قدمی بردارن، اینها خواسته یا نهاست؟ تو کی میخوای خودت رو به جهان نشون بدی؟ تو به زمان کی میخوای خودت رو نشون بدی؟ تو به امام زمان کی میخوای خودت رو نشون بدی؟ تو به حسین زمان کی خودت رو میخوای نشون بدی؟ بگی و نصرتی لکم معده. امام زمان تو رو میخواد به خدا نشون بده که اینها به اصرار خودشان آمده اند. کسی به اینها نگفته بیایی. چرا اگر نمیتونستی بری 2 نفر رو جای خودت راه نینداختی که برن؟ رسم بوده امام معصوم به جای خودش گاهی زائر میفرستاده کربلا. بعضی از جوانها وقتی ببینه یه بانی پیدا شده که او رو داره میفرسته میره و بعد اونجا تحول پیدا میکنه، اونجا به زیارت سید الشهدا خواهد رفت. کم نبودند کسانی که بی نماز بودند و کم حجاب بودند و بازگشتند و بهترین ها شدند و در همان مسیر تحول پیدا کرده اند.
ما با اهل بیت امتحان میشیم.
در زیارت جامع فرازی هست که می‌فرماید والباب المبتلا به الناس، در خانه اهل بیت فقط در خانه ای نیست که حاجت بده، بلکه این در خانه دری است که انسان با آن امتحان می شود. باب المبتلا به الناس، هر کسی هر چقدر میتونه برای اربعین ابا عبدالله الحسین علیه السلام مایه بگذاره، از این امتحان روسفید بیرون خواهد آمد.
احتمالاً یک امتحانی در پس اربعین برای ما هست. پیشنهاد من اینه برای اینکه در این امتحان روسفید باشیم، هر کی نمیتونه اربعین بره 1 نفر رو به جای خودش بفرسته.
So that was a short video by Arb'aeen sharing the importance of ziyarat and the importance of how ziyarat can have a positive effect on individuals, how ziyarat can be actually physically going to the shrine of Imam Hussein, actually going physically to the shrine of Abu Abdullah, how can it can be a spark for individuals, it can change people's lives. So with that being said, I'd like to invite our first speaker for tonight, our esteemed guest, our esteemed scholar by the name of Sheikh Shafiq Huda. And inshallah, he will enlighten us on the importance of these nights, the importance of the Azah, and how important it is to actually continue these Azah throughout our lives. And with a loud salawat, I'd like to invite Sheikh Shafiq Huda. Sheikh Shafiq Huda is going to be joining around 8:30, inshallah. So with that being said, we can go ahead and get started with Sister Layla. Sister Layla, if you are okay to start off as the first speaker for today, then we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Was that a yes? You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm going to be reading I'm not a speaker, I'm just going to be reading my talk. Why can't you always remember this? When asked why Native people in Canada can't just get over what happened to them, this is the answer Indigenous Justice Murray Sinclair, the chairman of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, the TRC, said on March 29, 2017. It is always the right answer. Imam Khomeini, may Allah be pleased with him, outlines simple enough for a small child to understand the distinction between justice and injustice. There are the mustakbirin, the oppressors and arrogant powers, also called the tagut, and the mustazafin, the oppressed and downtrodden. The oppressors always commit injustices against the mustakbirin. Against the mustazafin. They are incapable of being just. They are incapable of putting things in the right places, where they belong, because they want all the things, and they want the mustazafin to make all the things, so they can take them. They want all the things the mustazafin have, including their land, their resources, their power, their bodies, their lives. Why can't you always remember this? Justice on earth will only be achieved through Islamic governance by the guardianship of an Islamic jurist who is committed on the line of the prophets, salam, and Imam Hussein's example of resistance against the oppressors. Ordinary people can, of course, try to be just towards themselves and their family, friends, neighbors, and people throughout the world. We can also try to stand up for justice and the rights of the oppressed everywhere, inshallah. Imam Khomeini, may Allah protect him, explicitly tells us, quote, the ugliest face throughout human history reveals a life without justice for humankind. All the misfortunes you see in various societies are due to oppression and injustice, end quotes. He explains that the oppressors rearrange it so people think the misfortunes are caused by some other reasons, such as children dying from hunger because of the lack of rainfall that caused drought. Imam Khomeini says that if there was justice, if people were just towards each other, we could create an environment in which we could live with less difficulties and hardships. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets to us with two goals: remembrance of Allah and establishment of justice. The forgetting of Allah the Most High is the root of injustice. And that injustice is the lies they tell, the lip service they boast of, the miseries they inflict on the world. Those who forget Allah cannot and will never provide justice, social justice, fairness, equity to others. Rather, as Imam Khomeini points out, they provide such things as, quote, human space flights and, quote, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And as it says in Inner City Blues, also known as Make Me Wanna Holler, quote, rockets, moonshots, spin it on the have-nots. The way they do my life, this ain't living. Send that boy off to die. Trigger happy, policing, end quotes. Through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, awareness is heightened and justice can prevail, even if only in a limited circle. That circle, that country, that world is where no one is oppressed nor taken advantage of by the powerful. No one is failed to be taken care of, and there is no war, Imam Khamenei explains. He further tells us that the fact that people, quote, fight for justice means that justice is, quote, more valuable and more important than peace, end quotes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us clearly in the Holy Quran, quote, say, I advise you of only one thing, that you stand up for Allah's sake in pairs and singly, then reflect. There is no madness in your companion. He is only a warner to you before a severe chastisement. Holy Quran 34:46. In our commemorations of Ashura and Arb'aeen, the 40th day after the massacre of Imam Hosseini alayhi salam, his family and companions on the plains of Karbala, we are expected to have learned the lessons they wrote on the sand with their precious blood. Lessons of faith, love, justice, and resistance. Those lessons must be learned, for we are called upon today to implement them, each and every day, inshallah. Without having learned those lessons, we would not be able to talk about and resist against injustices now. Without having learned those lessons, the lessons of the children and their mothers upon the plains of Karbala, on the day of Ashura, the lessons of Sakina and Ali Asghar, of On and Muhammad, of Qasim, we would not be able to confront the enemies of humankind, the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We wouldn't have the courage or the inclination to do so. The oppression and injustice towards children all over the world is particularly difficult to talk about. It is difficult to hear. It is difficult to watch. The trauma that is inflicted upon children is horrific. It is arguably the most horrific to even think about. The oppressors hope that we won't, that we'll not go there. I remember telling my mother so many years ago that even if all the American government had done was to exterminate the Native people and enslave the black people, I would still hate them. But of course, that is not all the American government has done in America. That is not all the American government has done in the world. And it is not just the government that did and does all these injustices, all these oppressions, and it is not just the Americans. We are responsible for our children. They have been entrusted to us. We must guide them towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and help them obey Him. We must inculcate good conduct in children. Our children must know that they are from us and that their good and bad actions will not only be ascribed to them, but also to us. These are the rights of the child as expounded by Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam in his treatise of rights. It seems unnecessary to lay out the rights of the child, since the love of children is a natural and a law-given characteristic of human beings, and in fact many animals. And yet we find that it is very necessary, because there is evil in the world, and those who forget Allah the Most High prey upon the innocent, the most weak, the most vulnerable, the children and their mothers. The United Nations wrote the, quote, Convention on the Rights of the Child in late 1989, almost 20 centuries after Prophet Isa alayhi salam. The, quote, Convention mentions numerous UN declarations on human rights and the rights of the child and women and juveniles that have been declared by them since 1924. All of these declarations, covenants, rules, and statutes. And children continue to suffer and die at the hands of the oppressors. And of course, the United States is the only country in the world that has not ratified the, quote, Convention. They claim it would limit U.S. sovereignty, and or, quote, cause unlimited interference in family life, end quotes. The U.S. presidents from Clinton to Biden never submitted the, quote, convention for ratification. The reason is because the U.S. treats children inhumanely and does not protect them, whether through police brutality, especially of Black children, Native children, and children of color, the juvenile justice system, trafficking for sex, poverty, homelessness, lack of medical care, inferior education, lack of mental health support, etc. Don't think Canada is any better. While their 1982, quote, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom lays out the rights of people, their treatment of children is abysmal, especially of the First Nations, the Inuit, and the Métis people. Unless you live under a rock, you must have heard of the recent uncovering of mass unmarked graves of Native children in British Columbia and Saskatchewan. This uncovering was exposed 6 years after the 2015 recommendations of the TRC. Why it took so long for the uncoverings to occur is a testament to how the Canadian government doesn't care, since they did not provide the funds to do the job. Native people have known all along that the Canadian government and the Catholic, Anglican, United, and Presbyterian churches perpetuated genocide on them, and the survivors' stories tell of the horrors of neglect and abuse, the sicknesses and the murders in the residential schools. It is what, quote, Indigenous elders in the Canadian province of British Columbia call the, quote, knowing. Chief Bobby Cameron of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous First Nations said, quote, the world is watching Canada as we unearth the findings of genocide. We had concentration camps here. We had them here in Canada, in Saskatchewan. They were called Indian residential schools. Canada will be known as a nation who tried to exterminate the First Nations. Now we have evidence, end quotes. The search of less than 2 acres of the 160 acres of the Kamloops Indian Residential School in BC uncovered 215 Native children's bodies. To Kamloops, to Squamish, I'm sorry I mispronounced that, First Nation Chief Roseanne Casimir said, quote, we are loath to put the responsibility of identifying those lost on the survivors of Kamloops Indian Residential School. We have been traumatized and re-traumatized already, end quotes. She called on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the Canadian government, and the Roman Catholic Church to disclose and share the attendance records of the schools. Quote, Evelyn Camille, a survivor of Kamloops, spoke about the abuse and neglect, about how many people died trying to run away from the school, either drowning in a nearby river or freezing to death after they tried to escape in winter. The Pinnaclet tribe in BC, quote, found more than 160 undocumented and unmarked graves at the Cooper Island Residential School on the southern Gulf Islands. Quote, survivors describe it as Canada's Alcatraz. At the Kootenay Indian Residential School, renamed as St. Eugene's Mission School in Cranbrook, BC, quote, 182 unmarked graves were found when people of the Akam of the Tanaka Nation went looking for unmarked graves in the cemetery. Near Broadview, Saskatchewan, the Cowessess First Nation reported that at least 750 unmarked graves found at the Maribel Indian Residential School. Florence Spavia, a Cowessess First Nation elder and knowledge keeper, quote, said her parents were threatened with jail time if they did not send their children to the Maribel school. She said that children were expected to learn how to assimilate and become Roman Catholics while rejecting their own spirituality and culture. We learned and they pounded it into us, and really they were very mean. When I say pounding, I mean pounding, she said. Cowess's First Nation chief Cadmus Delorme said, quote, the truth is here. Everybody has to reset the ignorance or the accidental racism that the Canadian education system has told before. The brutality in the mostly Catholic run, and especially by the Roman Catholic Oblates of Mary Immaculate residential schools, is described as overwhelming, quote, haunting loneliness and perpetual hunger, end quotes. The threat of and frequent use of force, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, resulting in injury and death, was the environment of the schools. The TRC's, quote, Missing Children Project has so far documented more than 4,100 deaths in the schools, but the full tally could be as high as 6,000, end quotes. There are, quote, huge gaps in the available records of deceased students' names, genders, or even causes of death, end quotes. 6 TRC calls to action are about, quote, missing children and burials, and demand a clear plan to tell families where their lost loved ones are buried and make sure cemeteries are well maintained, end quotes. Up to now, it's said that 6,509 children is the latest number of unmarked graves. 6,509. While the Anglican, Presbyterian, and United Churches and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, have apologized for their role in the residential schools, and even former Prime Minister Stephen Harper said, quote, sorry, in 2008, it does not erase the fact that systemic racism, settler colonial mentality, white supremacy, hatred, and evilness for anyone other than them, even if they call themselves Christians, are the branches of their injustice and oppression, the root of which is forgetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Separating and isolating Native children from their parents and families, effectively cutting off all ties to their cultures, and tormenting and traumatizing to assimilate them into Western European culture is evil incarnate. But to murder the children and bury them in unmarked graves is a crime they should rot in hell for, especially since those responsible pretended they were Christians, knowing full well that Prophet Isa alayhi salam would never do that. So, why can't you remember this? Because if you remember, then you'll know. And you'll know always. And you'll have to take a stand. And you'll have to do something about your knowing, your remembering. And don't think that it's not still going on. It is. The Mustakbirin will always be oppressive and unjust to the Mustazafin. Make sure you're on the right side. As Kanahus Manuel, an indigenous activist from Kamloops, BC, said, quote, stop crying on the shoulder of the man who stole your land. Just crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and beating your chest is not enough. We are representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. You should know what to do. Imam Hussein alayhi salam didn't ask, is there anyone to help me? Because he needed help. He repeatedly asked that to make sure you have the opportunity to get on the right side and do something pleasing to Allah and helpful to the Mustazafin. There are plenty of opportunities to help out, to work on justice, to lend a hand and a heart to children and their families. Native lives, Black lives, Palestinian lives, Yemeni lives, Muslim lives. Just as the past 150 years plus have been filled with oppression against Native people in the Americas, Imam Khamenei in his 2021 Hajj message states, quote, over the last 150 years, Muslim nations have not had any role in the deciding of the fate of their countries and their governments. Apart from a few exceptions, they have all been led and governed by transgressing Western governments, while being subject to their greed, interference, and malevolence. Scientific backwardness and political dependence in many countries is the product of that passivity and incompetence. Today, our nations, our youth, our scientists, our religious scholars, our civic intellectuals, our politicians, our political parties, and our people must make up for that dishonorable, embarrassing past. They must stand firm and resist the aggression, interference, and wickedness of Western powers. All that the Islamic Republic of Iran is saying that has caused the global arrogance to become despondent and infuriated is actually an invitation to this kind of resistance. This is a resistance in the face of the interference and evil of America and other transgressing countries, so as to take the fate of the world of Islam in one's own hand by relying on Islamic teachings. Naturally, America and its cohorts are sensitive about the word resistance and have decided to show all kinds of hostility to the Islamic resistant front. Some regional governments' cooperation with them is a bitter reality that strengthens those malicious acts as well. We must nurture selflessness, love, affection, and unity. Sorry, that was end quotes there. We must nurture selflessness, love, affection, and unity in environments of justice and equity, starting in our homes. It is our responsibility to instill in our children the traits of being friendly, kind, and generous to others. We can talk of the plight of the needy, the poor, the orphans, the disabled, and the elderly with our children. We can visit these people and invite them to our homes and support and help them. We can talk about the tyranny people experience and how and why they are oppressed and suffering. Setting a good example by caring for others will help our children to do likewise, inshallah. We must engage our children with other Muslims at the masjid, madrasa, conferences, sports, etc., and provide wholesome and enlightening reading materials. For example, what our company, Inked Resistance Islamic Publishing, is offering, inshallah. We must encourage our children to be activists, writers, journalists, teachers, scientists, and all the helping occupations, inshallah. We must also support our children in their professions as publishers, movie producers, writers, artists, photographers, broadcasting, etc. We must help our children to understand the plight of the Mustazafin all over the world and to care about all of them. Otherwise, what's the point of living? Kanahus Manuel said, quote, "Our children are our sovereignty. They inherit that sovereignty from the beginning, and we pass that on to them," end quotes. Make sure your children know whose side you're on, so they'll be on the right side too, inshallah. Remember, verily Allah orders the doing of justice and the doing of good and the giving to relatives, and He forbids indecency and evil and rebellion. He admonishes you that you may be mindful. Quran 1690. So why can't you always remember this? It is important to connect the Native people's resistance with the Palestinian people's resistance and with the resistance of all of the world's Mustazafin. It is important to know who the enemy is and how they operate. The connection between the Native people and the Palestinian people has been made, alhamdulillah. And it is clear to understand through these following truths taken from the Palestinian Youth Movement's link to the Decolonized Palestine website, a must-read website for all resistors, inshallah. 1, quote, "A colonial system will never serve justice to the very people it oppresses." 2, the oppressed are dehumanized, so they can never be seen as victims. 3, the oppressors try to erase the people's, quote, "actual identity." 4, the oppressors, quote, "cannot even begin to comprehend the humanity of the colonized." 5, quote, "oppressive systems have always accused the oppressed of exaggerating or lying about their lived experience," end quotes. Mo Al-Ghassem of the Palestinian Youth Movement and head of QP 4207 said on the Canada-Palestine Association and the BDS Vancouver Coast Salish Territories webinar on August the 3rd, 2021, that people, corporations, and states are, quote, profiting off of the suffering of other people, end quotes. He reiterates that the Zionist state of Israel is a, quote, carceral state, end quotes. It is clear that the Canadian government and churches effectively incarcerated Native children in residential schools and continue to oppress and incarcerate Native peoples, Black people, and people of color, and the military prison industrial complex does the same thing to Native peoples, Black people, and people of color in the US of A. The Indian Act, reserve system, and residential schools in Canada, and the reservation systems in the US were used as a model for apartheid in South Africa and Zionist apartheid. Quote, apartheid is a system of racial segregation against the natural people of the land, end quotes. Hannah Kawas of the Canada-Palestine Association reminded us on the webinar, quote, a concrete step is worth more than 1,000 programs, end quotes. And, quote, a revolution needs working hours, end quotes. So let's get busy, inshallah. As Imam Khamenei explains, quote, on the one hand, we can learn the lesson of gaining power using resistance and fighting against the transgressing aggressors. On the other hand, we can learn that humiliation results from submitting to them and showing weakness. The true divine promise is assistance for the fighters in the way of Allah. Quote, if you aid the cause of Allah, He will aid you and plant your feet firmly. 47:7 of the Holy Quran. Imam Hussein told us, death with dignity is better than life with humiliation, end quotes. So remember this always, inshallah. Thank you.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad Hassan. Well done,
Thank
brother.
you, Sister Leila, for your beautiful words. I really enjoyed how you highlighted the importance of justice and how our imams, especially Imam Hussein, exemplified justice through his actions in Karbala, and how there's injustice going on in our backyards on a daily basis, whether it be through the First Nations people, whether it be through Palestine, whether it be through all the residential schools, and how that education system is continuing on a daily basis. So thank you, Sister Leila, for your words. Our next speaker is going to be Sheikh Shafiq Huda, and inshallah, I'd like to invite him up with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين خالق السماوات والأرض إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين طه وياسين بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين ورحمة الله على محبيهم ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, respected scholars, the hosts, the organizers, my sisters, my brothers, my youngsters, my elders, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Allah Ta'ala, the Almighty Creator, be upon all of you. It is an honor to be given this opportunity to speak about Hosseini children and to share a few thoughts, and especially after listening to the powerful presentation given by Sister Leila. It is an important awakening for all of us to realize that, you know, not all that glitters is gold. I think there's an adage that mentions that all that glitters is not gold, and the grass is always seeming greener on the other side. And basically what these things are conveying to us, my dear sisters and brothers, is the fact that people have got a certain perception as to what is a certain nation, a certain ideology, a certain part of the world. And then you've got the reality. You've got the reality as well. And these sometimes can be two diametrically opposite results or things that need to be really reflected upon. In my own birth country of Uganda and in the region of East Africa, there was a time when people thought that going to the West, going to England, because England was the only place that was, approachable and was able to be reached and gone to. People thought that there was a certain, excitement and a certain prestige going to England and being educated in a British university or an English institution, or going to the West and basically getting your degree and diploma from there. And what is really sad and frustrating for me to see that this phenomena has been in the last 100 or so years, whereby the Western world has got this so-called prestige that, oh, I've studied at this university, I was at Oxford, I was at Cambridge, I was at Harvard. And if you look back a few centuries earlier, the same prestige was actually in the Muslim world. The same importance was given to universities in the Muslim world, where science, education, technology was at its pinnacle, was at its height, and people were actually enthusiastic in studying in one of these universities that were in the Muslim world. Whether you look at medicine, you look at mathematics, algebra, calculus, you look at astronomical studies, excuse me, and you look at whatever science were around, and eye operations, medical advancement, you will see that the Muslims were at the forefront, and the prestige was coming to these universities and not anywhere else. And what we find is that a strategic plan was devised by a number of nations that are hostile, a number of empires at the time, a number of entities that were hostile to Islam, to basically use a multi-pronged effect, a multi-pronged approach on how to devalue and how to basically lessen the impact of this scientific and technological advancement that the Muslim world had, and basically shift it, create a paradigm shift from the Muslim world, from these Quranic teachings and the teachings of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad alayhi wassalam, peace be upon them all, and basically either reduce or remove the value of this education in these places, or outright end it. And as I was saying, that in my own area of birth area of East Africa, one of the first things that was done was all the institutions of higher education or senior education, whereby, because you see, when the Muslims had this scientific advancement, their professors would often go to places where the need was there. And so, in Africa, there were teachers, and they used to call them muallims, to come and teach them and help them be advanced, when the various powers, including the British and the French and the Dutch, because the Americans didn't have much of a foothold, alhamdulillah, at that time, they reached out and they shut these universities, they shut these colleges, they shut these centers of higher learning. And even Al-Azhar of Egypt, which was actually founded by followers of Ahlul Bayt during the Fatimiyya dynasty, was basically reduced to just a religious establishment, no secular education, no secular importance. And so what we find is that the Muslims then shifted towards these other nations. And as a result of that, what would happen is that whatever they wanted us to learn, they would teach us. Whatever they didn't want us to learn, they would remove us from. And throughout the age, we saw the removal of taqwa, we saw the removal of iman, and we saw this approach taken from a young age in order to devalue the importance of education. If I was to give you an interesting study that one of our professors in Vancouver had told me in a session that we were in together, that after the Second World War, after World War II, when the Americans had basically, when Japan surrendered to the Americans, and the Americans were now determining the treaty and everything, one of the terms, and now, you have to understand this very carefully, of that treaty was that kindergarten syllabus will be determined by us, and in the US. Now, again, you would think that at a higher level, when it's university, when it's education, when it's, college, start deciding the syllabus then. Why you get the kindergarten syllabus? And this will tie in directly with our topic and with our session today in this Hosseiniya, children of the Hosseini. That what they did was they understood that the mind gets developed, the education gets developed right from kindergarten. You don't have to wait for them to go to elementary school or to go to junior high or to high school or to college or university. No, you start right at kindergarten. And kindergarten is where the mind is formulating, where the whole outlook of the individual will be formulated. And the Americans knew that psychologically, this is where we want to put our nose in. This is where we want to make sure that we put our foothold in, so that we can develop them, we can formulate them, we can, it's like having Play-Doh or having this clay Play-Doh or something, whereby you make it shapes as you want to, make shapes as you want to, and you do whatever you wish. This is how they saw the mind of the child. This is how they saw the mind of the children. And this was where, whether you look at the residential schools here in Canada, which, as our dear sister Leila has mentioned, and you look at the United States and you look at so many other places, you find that they were aiming at that level. They took the children away from their parents. They molded the children's education so that they could make them subservient to them, subservient to their ideology. And we see this continuing today. If you look at the educational institutions today, the curriculum that is implemented in many of these schools, in the public school system, you will see the same indoctrination. What is happening now, and it's a painful thing to talk about now. At that time, they physically took the students away from their children, from their parents. They physically put them in residential schools. They tried to assimilate their identities, block out all of their, Aboriginal, native rights, rituals, identity, names, and everything they had, and they made them molded into their definition of what a child should be like. Okay, and thereafter, you see the same thing happening today, my sisters and brothers, but it's done in a slightly different way. They're not physically taking you out. They're not physically removing you from the your physical environment, but those 6 or 7 hours that you're spending in school, you are being indoctrinated. You are being taught what is right and wrong. And sadly, all of the wrongs are becoming rights, and all of the rights are becoming wrongs. Sometimes children become afraid to ask for a prayer room. Students become youngsters, youths become afraid to ask for a place to pray or a place to think or a place to meditate. And instead, there are clubs, there are associations, there are assemblies that are completely different. When I was in high school, I grew up here in the West, in the city of Kitchener. I grew up, my whole education was here. And at that time, in the high schools, we had social clubs for science club, we had innovation club, we had a technology club. At the time, technology was quite limited. We had checkers club, sports clubs, and all that. And now what you have is clubs that are totally opposed to not only Quranic teachings, not only these gender, transgender, homosexual, lesbian, LGBT studies and clubs and encouragement, but all of these things are actually causing the child, the student, the youngster, the youth to be desensitized to sin. Not worry about what is sin, desensitize them against the laws of Allah, and basically they become accepting of whatever is forbidden, not only in the Quran. There are certain things that are biblically forbidden. The Torah does not accept them. The Torah does not accept them. The books of the Hindus and the Sikhs are against such definitions of family, such corruption and manipulation of one's human existence. And so all of these scriptures, and now people are told to be desensitized to them, be secular, be secular. And again, this type of oppression and this type of manipulation was happening in the time before Islam's advent as well in the Arabian Peninsula. Children were abused and women were abused. There was slavery in a very pathetic form. And the Prophet of Islam came to free the people from this mental and psychological bondage, enslavement, manipulation, and free them in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if you are going to be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not of any person, not of any entity or human being or power. And this is where the Islam gave us that termination, confrontation with colonization, oppressive power.
Assalamu alaikum. I believe that Sheikh Shafiq Huda is having a little bit of technical difficulties right now. So we'll just wait for him to sign back in. We'll give him maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll continue with the program, inshallah. Salam, he should be back in about 2 to 3 minutes, inshallah.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what has happened, but can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I will just continue where I left off. Do forgive me. I'm using my phone now. Something happened with my laptop. I am so sorry. So from the time of the revolution, what we have found is that Allah Ta'ala gave us an opportunity to be awakened through the barakah of Imam Khomeini and the revolution, and that we were able to realize and open our eyes and our ears and our minds to what was actually happening around the world. You see, even today, a majority of the people, a majority of the nations of the world are asleep. They're oblivious to what's happening. They don't care as long as they get funding, as long as they get, whatever military aid or this aid or that aid they get. That's all they care about. That's all they're worried about. They don't care about the intellectual freedom, the spiritual freedom, and the freedom that is the true freedom to believe and worship in Allah and set their own destinies and set their own priorities and let their nations
be nations that are under the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was the revolution of Iran that actually opened that up. And that's one of the reasons why, not only in the Muslim world, not only for the Shia, the revolution of Iran was an awakening and was an eye-opener for nations and countries like Venezuela and Cuba, and those who are not even Muslims, who were able to take inspiration and to take benefit, spiritual and freedom benefit. And one of the things that we see is that Islam gave particular importance to the children. So the same way that other corrupt and ideologies that wanted to dictate the kindergarten syllabus, these superpowers that realized and they used their psychology. Islam 1400 years ago had already told us and taught us that the children are an important and a valuable part of our community and our society. And that is why when they are trained well, when the children have been brought up well, and from the young age, they have got the right training from their parents, from their elders, from their spiritual teachers and their physical teachers, and everything that is important has been inculcated in them. Then you have children who grow up to be youngsters, youths, and adults who will be willing to give whatever they have in the way of Islam for the sake of Imam Mahdi ajallahu ta'ala dhuhuru, as they had done for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. On the plains of Karbala, imagine for a moment, and you read any history, you read any Maqtal narration, the books of Karbala and the not one mother on the side of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam had to encourage or enforce or to tell their children that you must go to the battlefield. Please go to the battlefield. Why are you staying behind? In fact, there used to be competition amongst the children, amongst the youngsters. You look at Qasim, you look at Aun and Muhammad, you look at all these youngsters and Ali Akbar. They would be contesting with each other, fighting with each other. I want to go first. No, I want to go first. No, I want to go first. The training was important. The training had been given to them properly. And so this is something that we find, that Hosseini children, the children of Abu Abdullah Hussein, who followed the message of Imam Hussein, their power, their strength, as a result of that training, as a result of that goodness that was inculcated into them, becomes very valuable, becomes very powerful. And they will be the vanguards of future revolution as well, because when you see haqq and batil, truth and falsehood at a crossroads, if they've been trained well, if they've had that Hosseini training, the training of Abu Abdullah, the message of sacrifice, the message of worshiping the true Allah and confronting the powers of the time, the dictatorial, tyrannical powers, whatever form they take. Whatever form they take, they might take the form of, these beautiful, as I was saying at the beginning of the lecture, that they might take the form of a beautiful Western nation. There's freedom there, there's liberty there. You can do what you want, and they manipulate that. They use that as a way of enticing that. That is why the Quran Majid in Surah Namal mentions that alladina la yu'minuna bil akhirah, those people who do not believe in the akhirah, who do not believe in the akhirah, their deeds, a'malukum, they will be seeming zayyana, their deeds, their evil deeds will be seen as attractive. They will be seen as beautiful. They will be seen as good, fair seeming. Whereas in actuality, it will take them towards the fire of Jahannam, of hellfire. This is a disobedience of Allah, a disobedience of God. And so what we want to make sure we do is we inculcate good values, so that those who have got the faith in the akhirah, who have good, genuine belief in the akhirah, they will do what God wants them to do. They will fight and stand against any oppressive, tyrannical, dictatorial power who tries to abuse them, who tries to move them away from the path of Allah, who tries to move them away from the Imam of the time. Those youngsters who have been trained well, who have got that Hosseini training in them, they will fight those powers and they will stand for the haqq, for the truth. And they will stand firmly that the Prophet of Islam has been quoted as saying that in that Akhir Zaman, the mountains will move from their places, but the true believers in the last one of us, in the Hujjah, in the Qa'im, the last one of us, that these people who will be with him, supporting him, faithful to him, the mountains will move from their place before Iman moves from their heart. And this is what we have to struggle for. And once again, I appreciate those participants who are there, the organizers, the management of the Hosseini Children's Seminar that you've kept a beautiful session and gathering. May Allah bless and protect each and every one of you, inshallah. May Allah keep all of our children safe. I did want to touch upon the indigenous peoples, the First Nations, and these residential schools, but our dear sister has done a fantastic job, so I don't think I need to add or say anything more to that, except that our thoughts and our prayers are with all those who had suffered and who are suffering. Don't think that this idea of residential schools or separating parents from children was only in that era. In some form or another, it is happening here. It is happening in many, many places. We must be alert. We must be aware, and we must, inshallah, lay the foundation for Imam Sahibul Amr, the awaited Imam, so that, inshallah, when we face the Imam, we will be able to tell him, we did what we could do. We did what was best we tried to do, and that, inshallah, will be our tribute and our contribution to the message and the movement of the Imam. The movement, inshallah, is very soon, very near. We have to be ready. The question is, are we? And inshallah, with the help of Allah and with the grace of the awaited Imam, we will inshallah make efforts, and such gatherings like this will inshallah enliven us and strengthen us to be able to do what is right. Once again, thank you for this opportunity. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon all of you. May Allah accept our efforts, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah reward you.
Jazakallah Sheikh Shafiq Huda for that very insightful speech on the importance of knowledge, how Islam was at the forefront of knowledge, and the removal of God within our education system has caused us to go astray. Now, I do understand that our education system is controlled by the West and all these governing powers, and it's so important for our children to come back to Islam, come back to God, and go that route when it comes to education. So thank you, Jazakallah, for that.
Just to add one point, may Allah bless you, inshallah. Jazakallah, Master of Ceremonies. I just wanted to say that, alhamdulillah, we have got some Islamic schools, we've got some schools of the Ahlul Bayt, and many mu'mineen are there attending with their, have enrolled their children. But there's still a big jihad, because outside and around, there's shaitan everywhere. Sorry for that addendum.
Exactly. I definitely agree with you. And shaitan works in very subtle ways as well, right? Because he's everywhere, but we don't realize it. And this could be through children going on the internet, going on social media, going on other avenues. And very important point, like you said, within the school system, things like LGBTQ and other things like that, which are indoctrinated within the system now. So it can be very tough for us, inshallah. Yeah, inshallah, Allah guides us and provides us with the resources that we can use to further our education system and further our knowledge as well. Brothers and sisters, this brings us to the halfway point within our program. For those of you who are watching, I want to thank you for staying with us for this long, and for those who are just tuning in, I want to thank you as well and welcome you as well. With that being said, I want to play a speech by Imam Khomeini on the importance of ziyarat, on the importance of the institution of Karbala, and how it plays a very important role in education and in furthering the message of Islam as well. So inshallah, we'll get started with that, and then we'll continue with our program.
هر مکتبی تا پاش سینه‌زن نباشد، تا پاش گریه کن نباشد، تا پاش تو سر و سینه زدن نباشد حفظ نمیشه. این گریه ها زنده نگه داشته مکتب شهید شهدا، این ذکر مصیبت ها زنده نگه داشته مکتب شهید شهدا. ما باید برای یه شهیدی که از دستمون میره علم رفا کنیم، نوحتانی کنیم، گریه کنیم، فریاد بکنیم. همیناست که ما را زنده نگه داشته، همیناست که این نهضت را پیش برده. اگر سید دوستان نبود این نهضت این پیش نمی‌رفت. سید شهدا این همه جا هسته، کل ارضین کربلا، همه جا محضر سید شهدا، کل ارضین کربلا، همه جا محضر سید شهدا.
That was a very short clip regarding the importance of not only the importance of our mourning, the importance of the institution of Karbala, but how important it is in regards to establishing that movement, in regards to taking that movement and allowing it to fester within us and allowing us to move forward as a society, as a culture as well. So with that being said, I'd like to invite our next speaker, our esteemed scholar, Sheikh Subaiti, inshallah, with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
عجل فرجه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بفضل بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله محمد بن عبد الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, dear Maulana Sheikh Shafiq, Sister Laila, dear brothers and sisters, the organizers, thank you for this beautiful event. عظم الله أجوركم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
In Surah Al-Nisa, verse 75, Allah the Almighty says, how is that you don't fight in the way of Allah and for the support of the helpless, man, women, and children, who pray, our Lord, bring us out of this land whose people are oppressed, and appoint for us from yourself a protection, and appoint for us from yourself a helper. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. This holy verse of the Quran al-Kareem al-Majid shows to us how important the rights of children are, to the extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling upon the believers, why you don't fight for those helpless, including the children. So be ready to sacrifice even yourself, to give whatever you can to protect those helpless. So the value of the life of the children is very important in Islam, and it's not like it's not to the point that nobody can decide to leave them behind in any battlefield. That's why it's not allowed to take away the life of even the non-born child, as all of you know, because this is the amana. This is something given to you, and you're responsible for the protection of these children. So this is to begin with. We cannot accept the approach of the Western ideologies and the Western teachings, which give the parents the authority over a non-born child, whether to live or not. In Islam, the life of children is equal to the life of man and woman, to any adult. And we have even to fight if it's necessary to protect the lives of these children. The second message that we can get from the Holy Quran is what we have learned from the story of Mubahala in Surah Al-Imran, verse 60, O Messenger, if they dispute with you in this matter after the knowledge has come to you, then say, come, let us call our sons and your sons, and our women and your women, and our souls and your souls. Then let us earnestly invoke and lay the curse of Allah on those who lie. Sadaqallahu alayhi. Another example that how the sons are part of mubahala and ihtijaj, of showing the hujjah and the proof and the dalil for those who were seeking to prove the Christianity as to be the Deen al-Haq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the Prophet to bring Hassan or Hussein salamullah alayhima with him to show how important is this encounter. And this is another example how the children can be part of these challenges, events, and encounters. So they're not putting aside, they're not leaving behind, they're not considered small for such missions, as some of the families are doing in our society, in our community, unfortunately, because of the tradition. Some traditions treat them as little persons who has no knowledge, no value, no respect, and this is very wrong, actually, because even the non-mukallaf who didn't reach the age of taklif in Islam, you see the riwayat and the narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam asking the parents to treat him in such way, even if he's from 0 to 7, then from 7 to 14. These stages of how to treat your children shows that no age are in vain, as the Western education system treating them. Like before teenager, they are non-responsible. Before maturity, they are not questionable. They can be just living in the way they like, treated by any means, waiting the time of the legal responsibility, which is 18 and older. While in Islam, yes, there is a age of taklif or responsibility, but still you are asked as parents to prepare these children for such age, for such taklif. You cannot leave them till the moment of taklif. So that's why it's very recommended that they start fasting earlier. They start to learn the prayer earlier. Girls that start to wear hijab earlier, you get used to it. And this is unfortunately what happened to some families, that when they leave their daughters to the edge of the age of taklif, then they find out that they're not ready, they're not well educated, well prepared for such taklif, and then the problems started to occur, Why we didn't prepare them when they were, a little kids with purity in their hearts and minds, and still living in your home, listening to you, obeying you, and this is a rights of the kids, as Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam told us in Risalat al-Huquq. He spoke alayhi salam about the rights of a child upon his parents, to educate him in a good conduct, pointing him in the direction of his Lord, and helping him to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, helping him. So a child needs the help of the parents to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So helping, I don't think it would be through pressuring, through penalties and the system of threatening. This is not help. This is punishment sometimes, and this is another problem that we brought with us from some older traditions, that using the force by the verbal violence, the non-polite words, to ask them to do the prayer or to wear the proper hijab. But in the real Islam, in the pure Islam, in the true Islam of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they ask us to help our kids to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how you help somebody? By offering him the ways and the means of help, being kind, being so supportive, trying to use all means of attraction to bring them to the side of Islam and to the side of ibadah. Also, Imam Zayn al-Abidin salam says, so act toward him with the action of one who knows that he will be rewarded for good driving, for good doing. Yani, the means is, when you act with the kids, with the children, you act as you're doing something that you will be rewarded for it in the hereafter. So why some parents, they like to do hasanat and good things outside in the society, while they don't think about it inside their homes? Dear brothers and sisters, our responsibility starts at homes, actually, and then outside. If we failed, la samahallah, in our homes, it will not be justified that because we were busy calling others to Islam. So when we have such faith of getting the hasanat and the rewards within our homes, and this is how Islam is asking the wife toward the husband when she serves the husband, not because it's a duty, rather because it's a way of gaining ajr and thawab and rewards. The same thing when a father is trying to educate and help the children to be close to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for good doing toward him, and punished for evil doing, and he will remember that he will be punished in the hereafter for evil doing. So let's our kids live with this equation, that if you do good, you're doing it for yourself, not for us. Don't think that if you pray to please your parents. If you do something haram, la samahallah, that you means you're disturbing your parents. No, this is in your account. This is for your sake. So if you do good, this is for yourself. And if you do evil, this is for yourself. And there is no strength save in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very important. Why? Because many of us now, they have left the places and events and activities where we should present to fight oppressions and to stand against Batil, against the Yazidis of our time. Why? Because they think that the strength is in the hands of the superpowers. They fear the agencies of the government. They feel some hardship in life. So as you may notice, dear brothers and sisters, in many communities now, those who do care and who do follow such programs are very few. And if you ask them why, you claim this is the countries of freedom, and meanwhile, many of you are sitting aside, and they are used to be silent and to watch from top of the hill, sitting aside, like those who sit aside during the time of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam and Muawiyah, and doing nothing, while they know that the children of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, of the followers of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, are treated with injustice. Let's remind you of what happened in Karbala. Their slogan was very clear: لا تدعوا لهذا البيت لا تبقوا لهذا البيت باقية. Don't leave anyone from this household. Stay alive. So if they have problems with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they have problems with those who fight. Why they've been asked to wipe off all the household of Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, even to kill the الطفل الرضيع, even not to give a drop of water for little children. Why? It's not just a criminal ideology. It's also because they know that those children will be the followers, the continuation of the Tariq al-Haq, of the way of truth. They will inheriting their parents, and they will be holding the mission and continuing the mission. So that's why they tried to kill even the infants in the wombs, and to get rid even from the kids. And history repeats itself, as they say, when the Zionist regime assassinated Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, rahmatullah alayh, in 1992 in southern Lebanon. They know that his little kid Hussein and his respected wife was with him. They were with him in the car. And even though they used chemical burning missiles to hit the car and to kill the little Hussein and his mother. Same thing happened with the puppets of Zionists, the Saudi regime, who bombarded many schools and bus schools in Yemen. Why? Don't they know by their technology and by their data that these are only school students who are coming from school? They know it, but they wanted even the inheritors of those freedom fighters in Yemen to pay the price with their kids. Don't forget what happened to the Iraqi children after the American invasion of Iraq. Thousands of children died from malnutrition because of the siege. Thousands of children died from sickness that nobody knows what was in the water and what kind of bombs and chemicals they use in Iraq. Many children were born to die. They were sick. If you can see it in if you search and review these dates after the invasion of Iraq and in these years of siege, Iraq was under American siege, you will notice it very clearly that it's not a war against armies, it's a war against children. They don't want these people to raise up children because they know that these children will be inheritors of Karbala, and they will be holding the flag of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, salamullah alayh, and they will continue the fight. يمكرون ويمكر الله والله خير الماكرين. They think that they will get away with it. They think that they, by this deceives way of killing the innocent children, they will succeed. But don't they know that the blood of these innocent kids will make the reappearance of Imam al-Zaman Ajallah Ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif faster and faster. And they give more moralities for those mujahideen and those who fight dhulm and oppressions to continue their efforts toward word of justice, toward getting rid of those puppets regime who, because of their money, because of their supporting the takfiris and the terrorists, they spread demolition and killing the kids and the children all over the countries by car bombings, by the fights they fueled with their money, oil money, and by the support and help of the superpowers who opened the frontiers of many countries and gathered thousands of them even from these countries. They know that they were gathered in the airports going to Turkey, then to Syria and Iraq, and they leave them go because they wanted to stand against the way of haqq, of those Hosseinis who are decided to fight against the oppression and to give the oppressed people a chance to enjoy independence and liberty, and to be only the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not the slave of anyone in this world. Thank you for listening. Thank you for this beautiful event. I applaud the organizers for choosing such subjects, because most of the times we leave, unfortunately, we leave these subjects for those NGOs and those who have their own agendas. They use children's rights, women's rights, all these things. And we look like we are against these rights. Where our Islam, our religion, our Ahl Bayt alayhi salam are the real defenders of the children's rights. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. جزاك الله شيخنا العزيز.
Jazakallah Sheikh Sabeti for your very enlightening speech on how we shouldn't really keep our children to the side. We should put them at the forefront, and how we should raise our children in a kind and very generous manner, and how the superpowers in the past have always targeted our children because they realize that if these children grow up with a good education, if these children grow up as Hosseini children, then they'll make changes in the world. So Jazakallah for your speech. It was very enlightening. And inshallah, with that being said, this brings us to the end of our program. For the brothers and sisters who are watching and have joined us, to our esteemed scholars, our teachers, Sheikh Shafiq Huda, Sheikh Subaiti, Sister Layla, and the organizers of this program, I thank you very much. We're going to end our program with the recitation of Dua Imam Zamana. So if you're at home, you're listening right now, and if you're watching this, please join me in the recitation of Dua Imam Zamana. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة
وفي كل ساعة
وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناسا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على
اللهم صل على
محمد
محمد وعلى محمد. جزاك الله.
أحسن جزاك الله.
محمد، أحسنتم، جزاكم الله خيرا.